Om Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Good. Be seated, please. Good. You'll need to do the zoom in on me, please. Thank you. Good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Very good. Welcome back. Welcome also to our many students regularly attending this class online. Oh, yeah, we need the projector on. Yeah, I can do it. It's right here. Yeah. Okay, I think that's on, yes. All right. So, welcome. We continue our study. In fact, we're coming towards the end of chapter 15. And in chapter 15, we've seen a lot of Sri Krishna's description of sadhana, spiritual practice. The word sadhana, it's significant. We use the word sadhana in vernacular language for spiritual practice. But the literal meaning of the word sadhana is that through which you reach your goal. A means for a given end is the literal meaning of the word sadhana, the root meaning of the word sadhana. So in this case, it's very appropriate to use it for spiritual practice because sadhana is that through which you can gain a kind of peace and contentment that doesn't come and go. Anything else you pursue will, at best, give you moments of happiness, moments of contentment, but through spiritual practice, through sadhana, through gaining enlightenment, you accomplish the real goal, and the ultimate goal is to have an inner peace and contentment that doesn't come and go. So, with that, Sri Krishna has, in the past verses, described two primary spiritual practices, jnana and bhakti. And we've discussed at some length how this is one of the unique features of the Bhagavata Purana, wherein bhakti is given a special position that it's not given in, for example, the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, we're going to get into a big discussion. Actually, instead of, why should I explain it when Sri Krishna is about to explain it much better than I could? So we'll just plunge in, and we'll see the relationship between jnana, spiritual wisdom for the sake of enlightenment, as compared to bhakti, devotion for the sake of enlightenment. And we're going to have a nice discussion here in the next few verses. So we'll continue with verse 31. Tasman mad bhakti yuktasya, tasman mad bhakti yuktasya yogino vaimaratmanaha yogino vaimaratmanaha na jnanam na cha vairagyam na jnanam na cha vairagyam prayah shreyo bhavediha prayah shreyo bhavediha tasmat. Based on all the discussion that's led up to this point, and you all know that if you miss a class, all of these classes are available on the YouTube channel. So tasmat, therefore, second line, yoginaha, and the meaning will vary in context. A safe meaning in most cases is spiritual practitioner, a seeker, one who practices yoga. You say which yoga, and that's all contextual. In this case, we're talking about bhakti yoga, which is what is said in the first line. He says, mad bhakti yuktasya yoginaha. For a yogi, for a spiritual practitioner, who is yukta, who is endowed with mad bhakti, mat being that pronoun I. So bhakti, devotion to me. So that spiritual practitioner who is devoted to me, who is madatmanaha, who atma here refers to mind. Be careful, it often has different meanings. So madatmanaha, one whose mind is fixed on me. What about that person? One who is deeply engaged in bhakti. Watch what he's about to say. Sri Krishna would never say this in the Bhagavad Gita. And what does he say here that is so different? He says, so for that bhakta, for that one on the path of bhakti, na jnanam, na vairagyam, prayaha shreyas bhaved iha. Iha, here, on the path to shreyas, the path to liberation, na jnanam, na vairagyam. You get that meaning. The word you don't get is prayas, which means the main thing, main means. The prayaha, shreyaha. The primary means for gaining liberation is not jnanam, spiritual wisdom, nacha, nor is it vairagyam, dispassion. Sri Krishna would never, ever have said that in the Bhagavad Gita. He does indeed say it here in the Bhagavata Purana, showing you something that we discussed before, and that is the presentation of Sri Krishna in the Mahabharata, from which the Bhagavad Gita is drawn, and in the Bhagavata Purana, from which the Uddhava Gita is drawn. The presentation is completely different. And here we see such clear evidence of this. In the Mahabharata, as we've discussed before, Sri Krishna is presented as Guru, as teacher, the one who gives advice to everyone in general and to the Pandavas and Arjuna in particular. He is Guru. He is considered Jagat Guru, the teacher of the world, meaning the teacher of us all. On the other hand, in the Bhagavata Purana, the famous quote I shared with you before, the very first book of the Bhagavata Purana says, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. But, tu is but Krishna is Bhagavan Swayam, God himself, not an incarnation, not even Lord Vishnu. Bhagavan Swayam, the one true God, the real God. Now, these are two very different perspectives, and you might say, well, wait a minute. How can our scriptures be so contradictory? And we've discussed this point before. A lot of people like to look for contradictions. If you look for contradictions, you will find them. In general, have you noticed that you find what you look for? It's a basic principle. If you have an agenda to prove something, any evidence that supports your perspective, you accept. Any evidence that disagrees with what you're trying to prove, your agenda, if you see that in writing, what do? Flip the page. This is called lazy scholarship. And it doesn't work at all. So, it's not a contradiction. If you look for contradictions, absolutely you'll find them. What is more obvious than the one I've just pointed out? In the Mahabharata, Sri Krishna is Guru. In the Bhagavata Purana, Bhagavan Swayam. That's a pretty clear contradiction, except contradiction is not the right term. And the way to understand it, you might remember me giving this example. Suppose you are studying mathematics, and you're studying geometry and trigonometry and all this fancy stuff. And in your book, you're studying what's called Euclidean geometry. And in Euclidean geometry, if I remember right, parallel lines never meet. And then, in the next chapter, you get non-Euclidean geometry, in which parallel lines meet. Uh-oh. Well, here you have a math book disagreeing with itself. It's a contradiction in your own math book. Well, you get the point. To call it contradiction is not the correct term. Yes, there are different perspectives. Who says there should be only one perspective? Who wrote that rule that there's only one way of understanding? Whoever wrote that rule was wrong. There is no such rule, of course. There's no one way of understanding. Here in the Hindu tradition, a point that you've heard me make before is a little different than this comparison of Euclidean and non-Euclidean geometry, but rather it's based on the principle we've discussed before, the principle of adhikari bheda. And this is one of the unique features of the Hindu tradition, which acknowledges the bheda, the difference amongst spiritual practitioners. We are not all the same. We don't look the same, we don't dress the same, we don't talk the same, we don't think the same, we don't like the same things. So then, if we are all so fundamentally different as individual persons, how effective would it be to have a religious or spiritual teaching that is one size fits all, meant for us all, without exception? This is it, and we don't care about your individuality, we don't care. You have to accept exactly what this teaching is. And you recognize that that actually is the perspective of most religious traditions. And I think Hinduism is an outlier, not just Hinduism, maybe Buddhism to some extent. But biblical religions don't seem to adopt that perspective, a perspective that acknowledges and embraces our individual differences. And when it comes to spiritual life, that means acknowledging our different needs for different spiritual teachings and different practices. One size doesn't fit all. Therefore, we're seeing here a recognition of the fact, Sri Krishna here recognizes the fact that there are some people for whom jnanam, spiritual wisdom, is the main path for them, but there are others who are less inclined to that path of spiritual wisdom and more inclined to devotion, and therefore he puts knowledge and devotion, jnanam and bhakti, at the same level, which is one of the uniquenesses of the Bhagavata Purana. They end up in the same place. And I think it's really important to show you now how they end up in the same place. If you are an ardent follower of Advaita Vedanta, you'll say, wait a minute. Because that seems what I just said, putting knowledge and bhakti at the same level, seems to contradict what Advaita Vedanta says. To quote Shankaracharya, jnanam eva bhakti, jnanam eva moksha. I don't want to mix up my words. Jnanam eva moksha. Moksha, liberation, is through jnanam eva, through knowledge alone. Then how can Shankara say that when Sri Krishna elevates bhakti to the same level as jnanam? And please don't suggest that, apparently, Sri Krishna never studied the Bhagavata Purana. That won't fly. What do they call, like a lead balloon? that idea is just sheer nonsense. That Shankara understood this well. So I'd like to go to the board and show you how bhakti and jnana can have the same status and yet be consistent with Shankara's statement about jnanam eva moksha. Okay, we'll need the light turned on. Yeah, thank you. There's one light that's marked. Yes, thank you. All right. Let me just check. I wrote a little diagram here. Make sure I remember it. Okay. So what we're saying is, unusually, jnana, which is spiritual knowledge, wisdom, and bhakti, devotion, are put at the same level. That's not very good. They're put at the, it still works, that's good. Okay, I just noticed that the battery line is down. Okay, they're put at the same level according to these two different interpretations, one based on the interpretation found in Mahabharata. Is this coming on the screen? Yes. And in particular, the Bhagavad Gita, and the other perspective found in the Bhagavata Purana, and in particular, the Uddhava Gita. So, how to understand this? I think I have to redraw it from my diagram here. Yes, I do. Okay. Here's the way it works. Jnana, most of you have studied Bhagavad Gita thoroughly. And Sri Krishna again and again stresses bhakti, karma yoga, and dhyana in addition to jnana. Now, jnana here doesn't mean knowledge in the conventional sense of the word knowledge. When we use jnana in the context of our study of Advaita Vedanta, jnana means the immediate, direct recognition of your true nature as Satchidananda Atma. I'll say that again. This is crucial. Jnana means what? It means not knowledge in a conventional sense. It specifically means the immediate recognition or realization of your true nature, that so-called inner divinity, your true nature as Sat-Chit Ananda Atma. That's what jnana means to Sri Krishna. That's what jnana means to Sri Shankara, and that's what knowledge means to all of us in this context. It has other meanings elsewhere. Here it means that immediate recognition. So in the Bhagavad Gita, what is the means to moksha? Jnanam eva mokshaha. as Shankara says, that recognition of your true nature is moksha. That's our definition of moksha. Because with that, moksha means, just to make that point clear, moksha means liberation. Liberation from what? Freedom from what? Freedom from suffering. How do you become free from suffering? When you have desires driving you into worldly activities and you get frustrated again and again and again, there's only suffering, continued suffering, therefore. Freedom from suffering depends on utter freedom from raga dvesha that push you out in the world, which depends on freedom from desires. How do you become free from desire? There's only one. There's only one way to gain complete freedom from desire, and that is to recognize you already have everything you want, in very simple terms. You already have everything you want. In my Guru's words, you already are that which you want to become. That truth, that's the truth of yourself. That's what the Mahavakya Tat Tvamasi means. You already are that, but that inner truth, that inner divinity is unrecognized. Excuse me. Because you fail to recognize your because excuse me just one moment. Because you fail to recognize your true nature as Satchidananda Atma, because you fail to recognize that inner divinity, which is your true nature, that non-recognition leads to desire, leads to frustration and suffering. The point I'm making is the recognition of your true nature as Satchidananda Atma, the inner divinity, is moksha. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna also talks extensively about any other cell phones can be turned off, about karma yoga, about bhakti yoga, and about dhyana yoga, meditation. Extensively discussed in the Bhagavad Gita. Why? Because in order to make that recognition of your true nature, you have to be ready. It's not an ordinary knowledge, it's an extraordinary knowledge, an extraordinary recognition. For ordinary knowledge, you might need ordinary preparation. For extraordinary knowledge, you require extraordinary preparation. For this reason, Sri Krishna stresses the need for karma yoga, for bhakti, devotion, and for dhyana, meditation. These are all stressed in the Bhagavad Gita because they are preparatory for gaining jnanam, preparatory for making that self-recognition. So this is the conventional teaching of Advaita Vedanta as understood by Shankara. So Shankara's interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita will follow this line. Yes, there are many other interpretations of the Bhagavad Gita, but having studied some of those other interpretations, I continue to find this one extraordinarily clear, meaningful, and helpful. Helpful is the key word here. So now, how do we understand then this different approach in the... Actually, we'll leave it like that. So notice the Bhagavata Purana seems to... let's improve that. The Bhagavata Purana seems to have given a promotion to bhakti. And you might conclude that since bhakti has been elevated to being at the same level as jnana, then what about Shankara's teaching? If bhakti is at the same level of jnana, that implies you don't need jnana. That's not what the Uddhava Gita teaches. That's not what Sri Krishna teaches in the Uddhava Gita. So let's see why. So in this chapter, we've also discussed karma, dhyana, and jnana a lot. This chapter 15 is on sadhana. We've spent a lot of time talking about karma yoga as a necessary kind of preparation. Dhyana as meditation as a necessary kind of preparation. I'm going to give you now a sneak preview of the next two verses, because the way Sri Krishna handles it differently in the Uddhava Gita, different from the Bhagavad Gita, the way he handles it is from bhakti, devotion. Tell me, when you take devotion with you to the kitchen, so you take devotion out of the temple, and you take devotion with you into the kitchen, doesn't that become karma yoga? Right? Bhakti, while you're engaged in action, is a simple definition of karma yoga. To be engaged in some worldly activity with your mind fixed on Ishvara, that's a classic definition of karma yoga. So tell me, someone who is on the path of bhakti, do you think they ever go into a kitchen? Probably. In which case, they practice karma yoga. Do you think the person who is on the path of devotion, do they ever meditate? They're going to meditate on Ishvara, meditate on Bhagavan, meditate on Krishna. Of course they meditate. So the point here is that bhakti naturally leads to the performance of karma yoga and dhyana. Anyone who is sincerely on the path of devotion will definitely be a karma yogi and will definitely meditate on Sri Krishna. They'll be meditator. So notice how karma yoga and dhyana are definitely included, which is why it's consistent. I guess the bottom line here is no contradiction. No contradiction between Bhagavad Gita and Uddhava Gita, no contradiction between Mahabharata and Bhagavata Purana, and you'll see that in the final step here. How's this? So that bhakta who's been praying, doing kirtan, reading stories, and so emotionally engaged in devotional practices, but not only in devotional practices, also engaged in karma yoga, which means it's now full-time. Bhakti is not only when you're inside the temple, bhakti is not only when you're praying, bhakti is 24/7, as they say. And also that person is engaged in a lot of meditation. Guess what? The culmination of this sincere devotion, coupled with the intensity of practice, coupled with meditation on Sri Krishna, who is not on the altar, but Sri Krishna who is here. What happens when a sincere bhakta, intense bhakta, meditates on Sri Krishna's presence within? That leads to the immediate, direct recognition of Sri Krishna's presence within as being one's own essential nature. It's not like you've seen these funny pictures of Sri Krishna sitting, or of Lord Vishnu sitting inside there. You see that little picture glowing something. Silly, but the point is, and let me make this point. Those illustrations are misleading. And they're misleading because they suggest that Sri Krishna's presence within you is something different than you. But when the sincere devotee discovers Sri Krishna within, they discover that that inner divinity is one's essential nature, which is to say, Sri Krishna, and as we've seen in the Bhagavad Gita again and again, when Sri Krishna says to meditate on Atma, then he'll conflate that, meditate on me. Meditate on Atma, meditate on me, meditate on Atma, meditate on me. You get the point. Meditating on Sri Krishna is Atma, Sri Krishna is your true self, leading to this. So that person on the path of bhakti, who is also intense, practicing 24/7, and meditating on Sri Krishna's presence within, that most certainly can lead to the immediate recognition of one's true nature, which is, you can call it Sri Krishna, you can call, if you are a bhakta, you call it Sri Krishna, or call it inner divinity. But it's the same reality that in Advaita Vedanta we call Satchidananda Atma. It's a matter of language. Whether you call it Sri Krishna's presence within you as your true self, your true nature, or if you call it Satchidananda Atma, to adopt our Vedantic language, it's the same reality, the reality because of which you exist. And as we just discussed, this recognition of your true nature will definitely give you freedom from suffering, which we call moksha. So notice when Sri Krishna elevates, when I say elevate, with reference to Advaita Vedanta, typical teachings of Advaita Vedanta, bhakti here seems to be given an elevated status, whereas in conventional Advaita Vedanta, bhakti is considered preparatory. Here in the Bhagavata Purana, it said that bhakti could be, remember Sri Krishna is giving you options. You can take the path of jnana, or you can take the path of bhakti. So he's not saying take one and not the other, but here's a point, and that is that with reference to the conventional teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, bhakti here is given a different status, not as being preparatory, but as being primary. Which is why in this verse he says, jnana and, what does he say? Na jnanam na cha vairagyam prayaha. That is, jnanam, knowledge, spiritual wisdom, and vairagya, dispassion towards worldly things, they are not prayaha, they are not central. Here in Advaita Vedanta, it's central. But rather, so what Sri Krishna does in that way then is he says, in this I'm being overly fussy perhaps, but forgive me. Because to me this is a big deal, but I think it's important for us all, at least at some level, to understand the absence of contradiction. So, when Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, you can take this path. In the Uddhava Gita, he says you can take either path. And in the Uddhava Gita, he gives you this option of making bhakti prayaha. Notice he says here, jnanam na prayaha. If knowledge is not primary, then bhakti is primary. But notice that when bhakti is primary, it brings in karma yoga and meditation, and eventually that bhakti ripens, as it were. It develops, and in its full developed form, it leads to the immediate recognition of your true nature as Satchidananda Atma. I think in the Narada Bhakti Sutras, the distinction is made between apara bhakti and para bhakti. So apara bhakti being conventional devotional practices. Para bhakti means when you know who it is you're worshiping. And to know Sri Krishna is not knowing Sri Krishna on an altar. It's not knowing about stories of Sri Krishna in the either in the Mahabharata or in the Bhagavata Purana. To know Sri Krishna is to know Sri Krishna as the truth of who you are, your own self, Atma. So, in this way, we can reconcile these two paths. They both, whether you make knowledge primary, knowledge, and again, jnana means this path of seeking the recognition of your true nature, or if you make bhakti, devotion, primary, in either case, you end up in the same place, so to speak. And anyway, I hope this isn't too confusing. Again, I tend to be a little fussy about such things, but I feel it's important that we understand there is no contradiction. These are not they are the same truth expressed in different ways to meet our individual needs. Make sense? The same truth expressed in different ways to meet our individual needs. And this point, then, Sri Krishna is going to make very clear in the next two verses. Yat karma bhir yat karma bhir yat tapasa yat karma bhir yat tapasa jnana vairagya yatascha yata jnana vairagya yatascha yogena dana dharmena yogena jnana dharmena shreyo bhir hitarairapi shreyo bhir hitarairapi. The verse concludes, the sentence concludes in the next verse, but let's see this one first. So he says, whatever you obtain how? Karma bihi, by karma yoga. Whatever you obtain, tapasa, by tapas, by austerities. Whatever you obtain, jnana and vairagya, whatever you obtain through pursuing spiritual wisdom, through cultivating vairagya, dispassion, whatever you attain yogena, by any other kind of yoga, whatever you attain through dana, acts of charity, dharma, living a pious life, whatever you obtain, shreyobihi itaraihi api. Api, whatever you attain also by itra, other, shreyobihi, by other means of gaining moksha, gaining liberation. This is the first half of the sentence. So whatever you obtain through any spiritual practice, can you spot one spiritual practice that's very notable by its absence in this list? What spiritual practice was not listed here? Bhakti. Right? You'll see that's the point he's going to make in the next verse. So whatever you gain through all these other spiritual practices, all of which are other than bhakti, any other spiritual practice than bhakti, so he concludes his thought. He says, Sarvam madbhakti yogena, sarvam madbhakti yogena, madbhakto labhatenjasa, madbhakto labhatenjasa svargapavargam madhama svargapavargam madhama katanchid yadi vanchate katanchid yadi vanchate. So, prior sentence said, by performing any other spiritual practice other than bhakti, here Sri Krishna says in the second line, mad bhaktaha, but the one who is devoted to me, labhate, gains what? First line, sarvam, gains all that. Whatever you can gain through, what did he say? Whatever you can gain through karma yoga, through tapas, through jnana, through vairagya, through charity, through piety, through any other means, sarvam, all of that, mad bhaktaha labhate, one who's devoted to me can obtain all of that anjasa, immediately. How? Mad bhakti yogena, through devotion to me. So here, he's making that point. Let me go back to the board. So the point he's making is that, just wait for, okay, it's coming. Okay. So the point he's making is that whatever other spiritual practices are there, which are practiced for the sake of gaining bhakti, sake of gaining moksha, he says all of that can be attained by starting out on the path of bhakti. Now, notice I said starting out on the path of bhakti, because suppose bhakti is what you do inside the temple. Problem, right? Because what happens when you leave the temple? Bhakti khatam ho gaya. That bhakti comes to an end, right? That's not enough. So as I said before, that bhakti has to ripen. It has to be developed. And what it develops into are all these other practices. It's a matter of starting point and intention. Again, recognizing that we all have different dispositions, so we will be drawn to spiritual and religious life with different intentions. But even though we come with different intentions, we end up at the same place, with one exception Sri Krishna is going to describe here. Okay. All right. You can please do the close-up and turn the slide back on. That's only the two things you need to do, close-up and PowerPoint. And then in reverse when I go to the board. Just those two buttons, close-up and PowerPoint. All right. And then vice versa, board and cam. All right. So let's finish up this verse. So he says that whatever is obtained for those on the path of jnanam, the same is attained by those on the path of bhakti. And if those on the path of bhakti don't attain those further sadhanas, as I said, the example I gave, and let me make this point should be made quite clear. You all know the story, or you may have met such a person who's very pious. They spend hours and hours and hours each morning in their puja room doing prayers and rituals. And then when they come out of the puja room, watch out. Because first of all, they're probably hungry and haven't had a cup of tea, so they're irritable. And they'll bite your head off. And watch out. That's my point. What kind of bhakti is that? It's a good starting point, but it's not the culmination. That bhakti is like a sprout which has yet to grow. and develop. When it grows and develops, then karma yoga comes in, meaning when they leave the puja room, bhakti comes with them. They don't leave the bhakti behind in the puja room or at the temple. That bhakti is with them throughout the day, and which means when you meet them, they won't bite your head off. So he says that whoever, just to summarize all of that, whatever is reached, I'm going to paraphrase Sri Krishna very broadly here, his perspective in the Bhagavata Purana. Whatever is accomplished by one seeking enlightenment on the path of seeking spiritual wisdom, whatever they accomplish can equally be accomplished by those who start out on the path of bhakti. Again, starting out means presuming that bhakti grows and develops and becomes mature. And then that person, labate, that person obtains what? Swarga, apavarga, tadhama, kinchit yadi vanchati. Kinchit vanchati, whatever the person wants. If that person wants swarga, to go to heaven, then the path of bhakti will lead them to heaven. If that person wants apavarga, moksha, liberation, that path will lead them to the same, to their goal. And if that person wants madhama, my abode, a very interesting word, madhama. And this is an expression that would be understood very differently in the Bhagavata Purana and the Mahabharata. So let me just end my comments with this observation. What is Sri Krishna's abode? Madhama. So the person either on the path of jnana or the path of bhakti can reach madhama, my abode. What is that abode? Well, it depends on your orientation. If you are a student of the Bhagavata Purana, you might interpret that as going to some loka where you are with Sri Krishna all the time. Now, that's fine. That's what the Bhagavata Purana teaches, that through this, not bhakti, we have to make a difference, ripened bhakti, cultivated bhakti, bhakti that stays with you after the prayers are over, after the rituals are over, after the puja is over. That cultivated, ripened bhakti can lead you to madhama, so that heavenly abode. But in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna puts a very different spin on that expression. Because Sri Krishna's abode, in the Bhagavata Purana, he might say some heavenly abode. In the Bhagavad Gita, he says, and you know this already, my abode is here within you. Why does he use these two different expressions? We've been talking about that our whole session. Adhikari, bheda. For some people, it's more useful to speak of Sri Krishna's abode being in some heavenly domain. For other people, it's more useful to discover Sri Krishna's presence within you. Notice I'm using the word useful. And just a concluding comment, and this is an important point you may not have thought about. So many times, spiritual life is said to be a quest for truth. And to me, that expression is misleading and harmful, because a quest for truth turns all of this into philosophy, right? What is the truth? Do Tell me, what is the truth? Do parallel lines meet at infinity or not? Tell me, what is the truth? That's philosophy, right? When we take that attitude with us, tell me, what is the truth? Does Lord Krishna really abide in a domain up in heaven, or does he abide within our hearts? Which one is true? Tell me. This is a problem. So to turn spiritual life into a quest for the truth with capital T or all capital letters, capital T, H, R, etc., I think that's a huge misrepresentation of spiritual practice, spiritual life, because it makes the goal abstract, intellectual, conceptual, and you can all understand the shortcomings of that kind of making the goal somehow conceptual or abstract, which it absolutely not. So earlier we said that throughout this chapter, Sri Krishna is talking about sadhana, not truth. Sadhana, spiritual practice, remember the literal meaning of that word, the root meaning? A means to the end. Now, look at this, and this will challenge you. Is Advaita Vedanta true? Or let me put it this way. Is the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita true? Or, recognizing how the Uddhava Gita is a little different, so now we create this. Is the Bhagavad Gita correct, or is the Uddhava Gita correct? Which is it? You see the problem. It's not a matter of what is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is false. That's back to that conceptual pursuit of some abstract truth. The question is, sadhana, which one is a means to the end? Or simply put, which one works? And that's very easy to answer. If you say which one is correct, is Bhagavad Gita correct or is Uddhava Gita correct, you can go ahead and have a nice argument. I'll leave you to your argument. I don't want to participate in any such argument because it's fruitless. So instead of arguing about which one is true, suppose we ask a different question. Which one works? That's easy to answer. Both? No problem. Koi baat nahi. All right. This is a good place to conclude our class today. And actually, we'll finish this chapter in the next class. Tomorrow, Sunday, we have our Vedanta class at 10 o'clock. Shankara's text, please join us. Followed by satsang at 11. Please come with your questions. We'll conclude with our prayers. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kaving Gavidam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatahana Shrinvan Uttabasira Sadhanam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururhatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramhanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityor ma amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.